I don't know of a better way. Like, I'm not saying that's cheaper
It's a higher class.
Just drop C++ and OTC 101. Literally, always the easiest class.
What's gonna further my programming career? C++.
Not knowing how to get around those.
Yeah, no, knowing that. I would judge it. I think a better frame would be something like a C++.
Well, that might set up. That one's the projector.
Yeah,
the projector would set up one.
There's no projector.
But yeah, like,
Just started.
which is, yeah, so I don't know if that was set up.
No projector.
I don't know if that was set up. I'm not sure if I know. So I still have.
See, if I got rid of C++, I could work on Wednesdays and Thursdays. Get more benefit.
Getting those schedules all fixed.
I think I'm only going to see This is where I was.
Yes, sir.
What would further my programming career? C++ or OTC 101.
But when you're taking 4 languages, though, and you that's
How many are you taking this semester?
3, and I hate it.
What is,
3 is hard.
okay, so back me up. What is OTC 101? That is like the intro to college class, like you should have taken.
Yeah, but it's if you need, like, for financial aid, like, he needs 2 more credit hours.
Well, let's see. How would he do in that class? He would go the first time and would say, oh, this is really dumb. I already know how to do this. I'm just going to get an A in this class. And then he's not going to go back. And then what's this grade going to end up being in that super easy class? Probably. That's usually what happens to people with way too easy classes, unless you're super tough and can make yourself go. But usually it's hard to go when it's stuff you know. Let's look at Windows Form Controls. Last week, you guys did a bunch with Windows Forms. Let's keep going. You ready? Hearing a lot of not readiness, which is fine. Now, this is kind of backing up and looking at some of the code that we did last week, trying to make sure that everybody's clear on what we've got. Getting it? So whenever we start out working with a control in C#, an action event or a control that's on a form property, we usually see that control name followed by the property of the control that we're working with. In this example in our code, we want to update the property, the visible property of our label 1 control. So we have it set name of control dot property of the control. Remember that it's a multi-part identifier. We always have the control name and then the property name. And you guys are all just wandering around thinking, maybe I should take C++. I don't know. This is the thing that will get you in the middle of the night in your program when you're trying to figure out why it won't work. Because it's super easy to leave off .text and be trying to set a control name equal some value. And you can lose a lot of time because it doesn't give you just a straight message like, did you mean the .text property? It gives you some sort of weird message about how something isn't quite right. So that's why I want to reinforce some of the simple stuff that we looked at last time, because when you're all alone, home alone is not simple. So the different parts of the identifier are separated by the dot or period. So our control name first, and then our property name second. And we always need both of them. Now, in this example, we're working with a Boolean. So we can check to see what the value of the property is now, We can update the property's value if we like. And then we saw last time that when we're working with a Boolean like that, we could say Boolean dot, what am I looking at here? Visible equals not Boolean dot visible. And then that cute little trick will take this Boolean, and if it's true right now, it'll change it to false. If it's false right now, it'll change it to true. So that's a good way for us to get rid of this whole if-else structure by just using that shortcut line of code. If we want to swap it. Now, if we're working with a string type property like a text field, we know that anything that's dot text is a string. That's what Visual Studio is considering it. So here we can declare a variable, save data. We're going to use the text property of our text box name control and put that data into our save data variable. And then we can clear out our text box. So again, this presentation is just real quick, short examples for you, because I've noticed as time goes on that you guys get the really big concepts and you know what you want to do. Sometimes it's the little teeny details of that one line of code that stand in people's way between success. All right, so when we're working with our controls on our form, always remember there should be a dot. So if we're working with a simple variable like save data, we have no dot. If we're working with a complex control, like a control on our form, we're going to see that dot in between those two names. Whenever we're using that to get a property value, we're going to have a variable name set equal to our control name property name. For example, we could have a name variable that we set equal to the text property of our text box name. We could have a number variable that we set equal to the value property of our numeric up, down, how many. Properties that we use on our form controls are just the same as the properties that we would create in our class objects. So we can also set those property values. Again, I can have control name dot property name equal value, like I can set the text property equal to hello world or true, whatever I want to set it to. So some common conventions. You guys might see some changes, let me know, because things are always changing as far as conventions go. Remember, conventions are just the ideas, what people like. They're not standards, they're not rules, so they can change and evolve. So whenever we're working with form controls, we usually want them to be added by the developer to the form design. The form control names are usually in lowercase letters. They start with an identifying prefix like LBL or TXT. So we want to make sure that we name all of the controls that we'll be accessing in our code. Whenever we're working with the properties of those controls, those names are already predetermined, like the .text property. We can't change that. The .text property is going to be the property that always contains the text value. So we can access them, but we can't change those names. All right, so I'll keep just kind of emphasizing some of those small things to you to make you say, what's he talking about? But also remember that you can do that code, make each of those lines of code really simple for you. Let's create a little application today. And I want to look at our stuff on Canvas as we get started here. We're so close to the end. We have this topic where we're going to be working on some more forms controls. Then we'll have another week or so where we'll be working on some additional form controls and reading files. And then we'll be kind of working on our final project. Can you guys see that assignment? It looks like you can't. Make sure you can. Okay, so week 13 is where we should be. And if it wouldn't let you see the pizza delivery assignment, please refresh and see if you can see it now. Okay, sorry about that. It wasn't turned on. All right, so for your pizza delivery app, the one that's due this week, we'll be looking at stuff this time and next time, getting you ready for it. So you don't have all the information in your brain right now that you need to do this. Don't worry, you have enough hopefully to do the ones that are due tomorrow night, not this one. So for this application, we want to create like a pizza order system. We are going to be looking at chapter 10 of that PDF document, and all of your test questions for this section will come from chapter 9 and 10 of that PDF document. Okay, so nothing from that other book. Now, whenever you look at this in the textbook, you might want to use what they've given you. You might want to just kind of look at it as a reference. But basically, we want a tab control in this form. So I want to be able to click on pizza or beverage or specialty items. And then when I have everything all filled out, I want to click that place order button and have it tell me how much the order is going to be. So today we're going to be looking at creating some forms that use some additional controls. And then towards the end, before we break for lab time, we'll look at throwing a tab control into the mix. So that's what you'll be having due this week. So for our application for now, let's open Visual Studio. And I'd like to create a new project. Now this is going to be a Windows Forms app. And let's name it Chapter 10. And this is going to be a club form. So club form app 102. So our club is going to offer activities for people to sign up for. We have this great club that just gets together and does some activities once in a while. So we want to be able to kind of plan these activities. Plus we want to use some different form controls in Visual Studio. So first thing on our form itself, let's change our text property so it doesn't say form 1. Well, then let's make it say club activity list. Now I want a different color. So I'm going to go to my back color and choose something. Let's see. I think I'll do like, oh, this is pretty. A blue. And then I want my for color to be something that's going to show up on that. So you could pick something, or I could pick something nice and light, or a really dark blue, whichever. I'll do midnight blue and see if that shows up. Now I want my font to be a little bit bigger, so I'm going to go to a 12. So I think that's pretty much everything I need to do for my form. I've got it all set. So for our club, if we're going to do an activity, one of the first things we want to know is what kind of transportation are we going to need as a club to go on this activity? So let's use some radio buttons for that. So I want to find that group box control, and remember it's in our containers. And I want to draw a group box here on my form. And I want the title up here for my group box to say something like transportation. And I'm going to fix the for color on that. And then I want 4 things in that list. Let's do walking. That'll be a radio button here. So my first radio button is going to say walking. And I want to name it RAD, walking. And then let's make our next one be flying. We have some big plans for our group here. They're going to be flying on some of these trips. So I'm going to name this radio button RAD flying, and I'm going to make the text be flying. Now next I want driving. So another radio button. This one will say driving in the text property, and I'll make it RAD, driving. And then lastly, I want by train. So I'm going to make it a radio button. And this one will be train, RAD, train. See, don't forget, Dr. Ford posted about being available at that scheduling fair. I'll find it. The atrium from 10 to 1 if you need to discuss your class schedule. So I think she will be over there tomorrow also. Sometimes people like talking about it with Dr. Ford. It makes them feel like they got the expert's advice, which is good. All right, so this is going to be my radio button set. And last time, we saw that our first radio button was getting improperly selected, and some of you did some great troubleshooting to try to figure out why that was. I know why that was, so we're going to fix it. But let's run our app and see, and we should still be having that problem. And sure enough, our first radio button is acting like it's selected when we start up. But I'm going to go ahead and use this opportunity to test and make sure that all my other radio buttons know they're part of that group and that no two of them will stay selected together. So our problem is that our radio button is the first tab index on our form, and that our tab index on our form identifies what order the tab key is going to move you around on the form. So if we add another item before our walking radio button and make it not be the first tab index, then it shouldn't end up being selected. So let's try it. I want to select all of these items on my form and move them down just a little bit. And I'm going to put a name of activity above them. So I think I want a label. And my label is going to say name of activity. Now beside that, I want a text box. So notice to me that label is really meaningless. All it's doing is kind of like being an indicator to the user of what they need to do in the text box. The text box is what's important to us. So let's name it. Now I'm going to give it kind of a long name. TXTBX. Last time, we named all our text boxes with a TXT prefix, and the textbook kind of all of a sudden starts using TXTBX. I think that is a better prefix because it'll definitely separate your control name from that text property maybe a little bit more. So let's use that prefix that's a little longer, TXTBX, and we're going to call this TXTBX name of activity. And I just am going to make that variable name super long so that it matches up with that label. Okay, so we put that new field on our form. Does that help with our radio button issue? Right now it doesn't. Let me show you why. If I look at my walking radio button and go down and find the tab properties, notice there are two of them. First of all, the tab stop decides whether the tab key stops at this control or not. So by default, all of our data elements are going to be set to true. Notice our labels are set to false, right? The development environment does that for us automatically. But my tab stop is set to true for walking, which is what I want. But my tab index is set to 0. If my tab index is a number saying what order things should be accessed by the tab key, that means this walking one is going to be first, right? Because we always start counting at 0. So what's our name of activity tab stop? I'm going to click on it and see right now its tab index is set to 2. So I'm going to change it to 0. Now, Visual Studio will automatically renumber those others for me and make this one be the first. So now let's run. And you should see that your radio buttons don't get pre-selected at all. So I can type in here. And now try moving around with your tab key. And you'll notice that the tab key really only goes to the selected radio button. So it's kind of like more of that group box that's the tab, but it does it in an interesting way. Okay, was everybody able to see that? Get it fixed? Good. So the textbook just never made the radio button be the first thing, and they kind of avoided that problem. And we ran into it because we were doing some experimenting. All right, so let's add some more. We've got our transportation now. I think that on the bottom of our form, we should have a status bar. Let's add it as a text box. So I'm going to grab my text box control. And down here at the bottom, I'm going to label this TXT BX result. Now, being a text box, I don't really want the user typing anything in here because we're going to use it to display messages. So we're going to change our read-only property to true. You can only read this. You can't update it. Now, I want to run and show you how that makes it behave. If I press my tab key, it goes to my radio button. It still goes down to my status bar and then back up to that text box. Right? So I don't really want it to do that way, to do that kind of behavior. So we could change that tab stop to false, but there's a better thing we can do. If we find our enabled property and we change it to false, let's see how that behaves.
Which thing are we changing?
We changed our enabled to false on this bottom TXTBX result, or text box.
And we're changing it from true to false.
Uh-huh. So now you should see your tab key doesn't go there. If you try to click down there, you can't. So that enabled property is really what we want for that, because we don't want it to be enabled like a text box in any way. So be careful with that. I'm glad Dominic pointed out where we were. In the morning class, a student was selected on their form and they changed the enabled property from true to false. So it disabled the whole form. And so it wouldn't work very well. But it did, it was real easy to fix once we figured out that's what it was. Okay, let's put a little label above that. My label is just going to say result, and that's almost for me. So we know that's our result label or text box. Now we've got a little bit here on our form. So what I'd like to do is build some output if somebody clicks my walking radio button. So let's double click on walking. So if, yes, sir?
So in the form control thing, where you put the buttons down and everything,
Uh-huh.
I named that button Rad Walk.
Okay.
Makes sense. But having double clicked on it, it says radio button 1.
So it didn't take your name. So let's Control Z and go back to your form. Let's take a look at that name. So in your properties, double check your name.
It says Rad Walk. But like, okay. But if I try and change the name of the function for it now, it gives me a bunch of error messages and it doesn't like that.
So tell them what to do. Delete it.
Delete it altogether.
Yeah, just the code.
This bit. I may need to. Here we go. Just delete the whole line.
You guys got it. It's so good. And we're going to do that in a second again, too, together. All right, so let's look at our code. So if the RAD walking radio button is checked, let's build our output text box message. So txtboxresult.text. I want to start out by setting it equal to that text box name of activity at the top of our form. Then let's add some more to that result text. I want to add a space, and then I want to add will be walking. Now we know from working with our radio buttons last time, we could set up an event procedure like this for every single one of those radio buttons, or we could set up some else if logic and use this same event procedure for all of them. So let's do that. I want to copy my if statement, and then I'm going to paste it. Now I'm going to make this one be else if, and then instead of RAD walking, we'll have RAD flying. And I'll change our message to say will be flying. I'm going to paste it again and make it be an else if. And this time we'll do RAD driving. And we'll make it say will be driving. One more. Else if RAD train. We'll make it say we'll be taking the train. It's hard to make that sound the same. Now we could add another else for some sort of error logic or something here, but we should not get there, right? But of course, as good programmers, we know even if we shouldn't get there, we should still put in that edit. So our final check will be an else, and we'll put in our text instead of our transportation. We'll say no transportation chosen. So now if we run, we should be able to pick our walking and see that message display. But it's not going to display for any of our other radio buttons because we don't have this event procedure associated with any of the other ones. Let's try it. Do walking, activity description will be walking. Now if I run it again and choose any of our other transportation modes, we won't get any sort of output because we don't have those set up yet. So let's fix that. Okay, ready? Now, first of all, we named this method RAD walking because it got created by double-clicking on our walking radio button. I'd like to rename it because I want it to be used for all of our radio buttons. So I'm going to change it to RAD transportation. Checked, changed. Now, as soon as I do that, when I look at my form, I'm going to have that big nasty error. And I'm not going to be able to go to my form to fix it. So I have to click go to code. Now I could delete this line, but all I really need to do is fix it. We named it RAD transportation. Except I need a T. And then it should find it. So in reality, we could copy this, right, to our other radio buttons. We're not going to because we get all these warnings about not changing this Windows system generated code, but we could. So let's go do it through the GUI. I'm going to go to my form and I want to select all of these radio buttons. I want to click on the events. And for my check changed method, I'm going to use our transportation check changed. Now you should have that check changed method associated with all of your radio buttons. Let's run and make sure. Here is our activity. And no matter which one you pick, we should get an appropriate response. Everybody's working okay? Good, good, good. All right. So let's create a list box. And our list box is going to be something that will hold a list of things. And we want this to be a bunch of events that we could choose from. So let's choose an event. And here I am. Okay. I want a list box to hold them. So if you look in your controls, you'll see that you have a list box and a list view. Make sure you grab the list box. And I want this list box to show up kind of beside my radio buttons. Now a list box is just like it sounds. It lets us put a whole list of things into this control. So a list box is really a way to display an array. We have a whole bunch of occurrences. I'm going to go back to my properties because right now I'm looking at events. And for the list box, the first thing I want to do is give it a name. So my prefix for a list box is going to be LSTBX. We'll name this one LSTBX activities. And then the array itself, all of the items that are going to show up in the list are contained within the items property. So the items property is actually a collection or an array. When you click on the items property, you'll see the ellipsis show up beside the word collection in the property. You can click on that ellipsis to bring up the string collection editor. Yes, sir?
I cannot see an items property. Am I looking in the wrong spot? Oh, yeah, I am looking in the wrong spot. Here it is.
Find it?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So go to your collection. Now we can add things to our list using this collection editor. We could add things in the code dynamically. So either way is fine. We're going to start out with this one of creating a list in this collection editor. So whatever we type will become part of our list. So we're going to have amusement park, boat tour, dance, dinner, hike, movie, and sport event. So now each of these items are part of the list property of our list box. Now whenever we click OK on the collection editor, we'll see those items show up in our list. And notice how if you make your list too small, the scroll bar will automatically show up. You also have property settings you can use to make the horizontal and vertical scroll bars always visible if you like. We can dock our list box. If you do the drop down when you're looking at the dock option, notice that it gives you a bunch of squares. So if I click on this square over here on the right, it'll make my list dock to the right. I can put it in the center and it makes it take up the whole screen. So I'll go back to none for this one. But you can do that and make sure that it keeps track of things. If you look around at some more of the properties, you'll see selection mode. Right now our selection mode is set to 1. That means somebody can click on one item in our list. We have some options though. We could make it multi-simple where they could select more than one item, or we could do multi-extended like Windows where they could hold control and select multiple items. We'll try that, but for now let's leave it at 1. Okay, let's run and see how that list looks. So now we've got our activity. We can see what's going on. And then we've got some great events here, things that we're going to do while we're gone. So it would be nice if we could add new activities to this list. We might have something that is new. So let's add that. Everybody get their list box set up okay? Got it? Got it? Just cruising. All right, so I want a new field to be able to add this activity. So I'm going to use a label. And I'm going to put in my text property, add an activity. And then I want a text box beside that for them to type that activity name in. Let's call this TXT add activity. And I kind of want that to happen with a button. So I'm going to put a button down at the bottom. You might want to change the way it's designed. But I want this button to say add. So I'm going to name it BTN add. Okay, so let's do it. In our add button, we want to add whatever is in that text box to our list box. So my text box is txt add activity. And I want to add that, so I'm going to wrap it in parentheses. And I want to add it to our list box. Whoops, I did more than wrap it. I just deleted it. That's all right. I want to add it to our list box items collection. Now, when you type out the list box name and type the period, IntelliSense gives you all of the methods and properties that are available for that list box. As you scroll through, you'll notice that you don't see anything that allows you to add. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of things we can use. Finally, here's all our methods that have the purple square. We saw our properties all first, and action events, lots of things that can happen with the list box. But it's only through the items that we have the ability to add. So as soon as you type that property name items, then the IntelliSense editor shows you new methods that are available, like the add method. Yes, sir?
If I may speculate on why that is, just so that there's more understanding. I'm guessing it's because the text box itself is an object. The items is a property of that object that happens to be a list. And so that is the thing that we need to do our add function on, is that list.
That
property,
list, that collection.
the object itself.
Right, very good. So on that collection. Now, after we've added that, we can update our text box, and we can use that clear method. And remember, we saw that with the text box, we could set the text property equal to 2 double quotes. That would clear it out. Or we can use this .clear method, and that will clear it out too. So what do you think you would use if you wanted to empty out the list box? The clear method. Very good. So we'll try to be consistent. They try to be consistent, it'll clear it out. Yes, sir?
Just another question I have about it. When we first looked at arrays and lists and such, it was established that you have to tell it how long the list is going to be when you initialize it. How does it decide how long the list is? It's
going to do it dynamically. So it's going to use one of those more advanced controls that doesn't require.
So we literally don't have to worry about it.
No, you don't have to worry about it.
Okay.
Good. Okay, so let's add a couple comments here. First of all, txt, whoops, I added text box result. That's not what I want. I want txt, I've got to type it again, add activity dot text. So txt add activity dot text contains our data. We want to add it to the items in lstbx activities. Okay, let's see if that works. Now I want to add an activity. Let's say, what do we want to do? Swim, that sounds good. Let's add it. Now, you should have that item added to your list. And if we would have chosen the property sorted or set that property sorted to true, then our list box items would automatically get resorted when we added new things to it or removed things from it. So it makes it very easy for us to use. Okay, so now we need to add these activities to our result message. Everybody good there? Got stuff? Okay. Be like a really good time to add some comments, huh? Sometimes when we're doing our form apps, it can be really easy to forget about those because we're just going off and learning some new great things. So for this app, I'm going to say that this is the club activity app. And our purpose here is to allow entry of club activities.
I'm gonna start on the code for the app button.
Okay. I'll go over there in just a second. Especially hard for us with comments is, if you're doing multiple classes, do you have to add them to each class? Yeah. We really should be adding them to every method. I don't require that from you guys because we require so many other things, but I want to encourage you for that. But, you know, we came back from SkillsUSA last Friday, not this past Friday, the Friday before. And of course, OTC took first and second in programming. I won't tell you how many other colleges there were that were entered. But anyhow, they did great. And the two guys that did first and second got together to kind of compare notes and be like, you know, we had the same classes pretty much with the same people. Why would one person, how were the judges able to decide? And after they got to looking, the guy that took the gold said, you know, I had a lot more comments than he did. Does that matter? I don't know. But he did take the gold over the other person who didn't have as many comments. So I think that you're always best to err on that side. It's kind of like with other things that you want to err on the side of more than fewer. But I've seen people get mad about it too and say, too many comments. All right, so is it working what we have so far? So we have some comments. Yes, sir?
One glitch I appear to have is that it's not a glitch, it doesn't per se, and that it doesn't crash everything. It is a logic error, I guess, in that it doesn't seem to be updating the list box accordingly. I guess. Like, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time explaining.
Does it add the new one to the list?
I assume it's adding it to the list, but it's not displaying it in the list box.
Can you share?
Sure.
Let me stop so we can see yours. Okay, go for it. Let's see what you got.
Okay, so I've got this one that is actually doing the thing.
Okay.
This one on the left is just Visual Studio. I can do whatever. And nothing. Like, given that
So what do you guys want to see? What do you want to see to fix this problem there?
I had the same problem when I put on the line where it adds new item, you put text box result instead of text box add activity, you get that.
Oh, let's look at your code, is what he's saying.
Oh. So this is the part where...
Oh, look, text box add activity. What property of the text box add activity are you using?
Oh, okay. Sure.
So you were on it. He was on it. Let's see now if that makes it behave better.
Maybe. It'll load eventually, I promise. My laptop is not as. Now what does it not like?
Are you running it?
No, it's. No, it had a build error. It didn't like that.
Oh, okay.
So it's just text add activity, not the box, I believe.
That is what I named the prop. Are you talking about this part?
He did it right. I did it wrong.
This part is right because that's what I named that object. Some kind of app open. Oh, you still have one running.
Yeah, I mean, it really looks like it's running down there.
Oh, yeah, that's.
It's what all those weird lock messages are, huh?
Okay,
Yay!
there we go.
Good job, you guys. Okay, good resolution. Let's do
Thank you.
that. You are welcome.
How do I stop? Share. There we go.
Got it? Okay. Now I'm going to share. All right, so now we need to handle this list box. We've seen how to put stuff in it at design time through that string collection editor. We saw that we can use an add method to add things to it on the fly at runtime. So what do we do to actually see what the user clicks on there? Well, let's look at our form. Whenever somebody clicks on an item in a list box, they're going to generate a list item index changed event. Because right now, if I look at this, the index is set to -1. None is selected. But as soon as I click on one, that one's index value, just like any other array's index value, will become the index set changed value. Okay, so anyways, I'm going to double click on this list box so that I generate the code. And here is our event, selected index changed. So that's what we're looking for. Somebody clicked on something in the list box. Let's do this one real quick because we want to change that list box to where they can choose multiple items. We're going to display a message box when somebody clicks on our list. And we're just going to say, you selected, and then we're going to add our list box, selected item. And selected item should be the property of the item that has been selected.
If we do like the calendar thing, that would be what we would probably use selected item.
The calendar could be a little different because the calendar usually assumes you're going to select a begin and an end date. So it might be selected begin date or selected end date, but something along those lines. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's try it. So here's an activity. I'm going to click on dance. It says you selected dance. Now, we just created that event procedure to display that message box really quickly because we would like for our people to be able to select more than one of these. So I just wanted to show you how that works if we only have one. So let's go to our form and change it so that we allow the selection of multiple items. We saw that that was the selection mode property, and we want to change it from one to multi-extended. Now, multi-simple is kind of a weird selection scheme that some apps use, but it's not very widely used, so you wouldn't really like it. Multi-extended is the kind we're used to, where we can hold the shift key or the control key to select multiple items. Now, when we do that, though, things are going to be a little bit different. Let's double click on our list box. Notice it's still using our selected index changed. So I got to find something. So what we want to do is process all of them. I'm going to put some code before this message box. And for each and I pressed tab so that Visual Studio would generate that code for me. So for each thing in a collection, we're going to do some processing. The collection that I want to use is our listbox activities dot selected items. Now we could do a couple of things here. We could look at all of the selected items, or we could look at all of the selected indexes. We're going to choose the selected items. Notice earlier we used the selected item, just one item. But now since we changed this so that it can handle multiples, we're going to use selected items instead. So we could say that each of these will be a string. And we're going to call them, we'll call each one an item. So now I'm going to take my message box statement and cut it and paste it into this for each. And I want to make sure that this message box is going to pop up for each item. So I don't want to display the selected item here. I want to display the item from my for each loop. Now let's run. And I want to be able to select multiple things. Notice how you have to fight with it a little bit because our event procedure runs as soon as we select that first one, doesn't it? And then if we hold the control key and select another, now we have both of them in our list. And if we hold the control key again and select a third one, and that's why I wanted to do a message box there so that you guys could see that that whole process is re-happening. Every time somebody selects one of those items, we now have a new item in that selected items list. So does that make sense? Do you see how dynamic it is? Sometimes in our mind, we think that method isn't going to kick off until we're done, right? It's going to somehow magically know which one was our last one we selected. But it doesn't know, does it? So every time we make some sort of selection, that event procedure is going to kick off. That action is going to fire. Make sense? Okay, any questions about it? Now this one is a lot of just random concepts for you, and I know that's what we end up with here when we start out with our forms. So to continue on that same idea, let's create a new project within this solution. And I want to create a tab control so that we can see really quickly how that works. So I'm going to right click on this solution and add a new project. And I'm going to leave it a Windows Forms app. And I want this to be Chapter 10 Tab Control. Now our tab control is a container. So you're going to find it down in the containers area. And if you drag it and drop it on the screen, notice by default it has 2 tabs, and it looks kind of weird, right? Because when we think about a tab control, we kind of think about it being docked. Let's try that docking. If I went in and I docked this thing and I said, oh, you're docked at the top and at the bottom and at both sides. Let me do that. Everywhere. You're docked everywhere. Notice how that different docking option works. If I do that, then I don't have any area left of the form that I can see. So that's bad, because I might want an OK or a done button to be showing all of the time at the bottom of the form. And if I have my tab control docked like this, I can't see that. So I don't want to do that. I'm going to set my docking back to none, and I'm going to control it manually. So I want my tab control to take up a lot of my form, but not quite all of it. That way I can put a button down here at the bottom, and I'll put in this text property, always visible button. Right? Because there might be stuff at the bottom like that we want to use. Now, when we're working with a regular class, we've seen that if we create a class field, a class type variable, that variable is global. We can access it from any method in our class. Any control we place on a form is that way for our form class. It is global. So if I put this button down at the bottom, I can access it from anywhere within my class. Now, the tab control is also global, but it's a little bit harder to work with. So how do I rename this first tab page? Can you get up there and rename it? How do we name that tab page? What we're seeing is we're seeing properties for the whole tab control. So we have to find the collection of pages. So in your tab control, scroll down and you're looking for, let me make sure I'm in the right place here. There it is. You want to be on tab control, and on your tab control, we want to find the tab pages collection. Now, in the tab pages collection, I can click those three ellipses again, the ellipse, and bring up the tab page collection editor. So now when I'm looking at this collection editor, notice I've got an entry over on this side for each page. When I click on it, I'm looking at all of the properties for that page over here. So tab page 1, let's say I was going to make that be our transportation options. Well, then where the text is, I could make it say transportation. And then if I wanted to rename that tab, I could find the design name and name it TAB transportation. And then my tab name and my tab text property would match. Now on my next tab page, maybe that would be my list. So I could make my text property say activity list, and I could change the tab name to tab activity list. So that's how I'm going to control what those different tabs are and work with them. Now, you could start designing how you want your pizza delivery app to look if you're done with the other two applications, but we'll be looking a little bit more at some other coding ideas that might be helpful for you next time. So if you want to go ahead and get it done, that's fine. But if you want to wait, there might be more ideas for you then. Questions about this? Great. Lots of stuff to play with and enjoy and learn. It's great fun. I'm going to end this session so you guys have lab time. Let me know if you've run into any problems.